We need to start tonight with some breaking news from the United States Supreme Court. Late tonight, just within the last couple of hours, the U.S. Supreme Court has handed down a pretty significant ruling on abortion rights. The U.S. Supreme Court tonight reversed a lower court ruling that earlier this month had shut down all but the last handful of abortion clinics in the state of Texas. Tonight, because of this intervention from the Supreme Court, the dozen clinics that were basically shuttered overnight earlier this month, legally, those clinics should be able to reopen effective immediately. Whether or not they can literally reopen, whether they're in a position to reopen after having been shut down recently, that remains to be seen. But legally, at least, they are now officially unshut down. This all stems from a sweeping piece of anti-abortion legislation that was passed by the Republican-controlled Texas state legislature last year, despite a marathon filibuster effort by a state senator named Wendy Davis. The law did eventually pass. It was signed into law by Republican Governor Rick Perry of Texas. Parts of it have been tied up in the courts and have been wrangled over legally since then. But 2 weeks ago, a federal appeals court did rule that the entire Texas law could take effect. And when that appeals court made that ruling 2 weeks ago, that shut down nearly 80% of the clinics that provide abortions in Texas. Before this law took effect, there had been more than 40 clinics in Texas that provide abortions. After the appeals court let the full law go into effect 2 weeks ago, all but 8 clinics in the state shut down. From 40 clinics plus to 8. There are 5.4 million women of reproductive age in the state of Texas. In the year 2011, which is the last year for which we have data, it's thought that more than 70,000 women in Texas had an abortion that year. But again, the number of places they can do that because of these court rulings had gone from more than 40 down to 8. That ruling left no clinics open south or west of the city of San Antonio. There was not a single clinic in the entirety of the Rio Grande Valley. In response to that ruling from the appeals court, last week, the Center for Reproductive Rights filed an emergency petition with the Supreme Court, asking that the Supreme Court take immediate action to basically put this whole thing on hold, allow those clinics to reopen. At issue here is part of the abortion law that was passed in Texas, which forced abortion clinics to make multi-million-dollar renovations, basically, upgrades to their facilities. It was very obviously intended to shut those clinics down. That particular part of the law has been put on hold once again tonight by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court also decided to give 2 clinics a reprieve from another part of the law that forced doctors to have admitting privileges at local hospital, in part because they are the only clinics in their respective vast and remote corners of the state of Texas. I should tell you that one of the clinics who got that specific reprieve from the Supreme Court tonight is the clinic that we visited a few months ago in McAllen, Texas. This is the clinic in the Rio Grande Valley. It had been the only remaining clinic that did abortions in that whole huge part of Texas before this Texas law shut them down. As of tonight, legally, they will be able to reopen. That clinic's owner, Amy Hagstrom Miller, is going to be joining us to tell us her reaction to this ruling in just a moment. Ever since this law was passed last year against that marathon filibuster effort from State Senator Wendy Davis, who's now running for governor, it has been expected that this Texas law would end up at the Supreme Court. Well, tonight, the court has made a significant ruling shutting down some of the most important parts of that law and letting clinics reopen. It was a split 6-3 decision divided along somewhat familiar lines. The dissenting judges from this decision were Justices Scalia and Thomas and Alito. They were indicating that they were perfectly comfortable with keeping the law in effect. Ultimately, in terms of whether or not this is the final word, it's not clear that it is. The case will now go back to the lower court, to the Fifth Circuit, for a full hearing in that court. That's not expected before the end of the year at the earliest. But in the meantime, clinics tonight are reopening in Texas, and that draconian anti-abortion law will remain on hold. Joining us now on the phone is Amy Hagstrom Miller. She's the founder and CEO of Whole Women's Health, which owns 5 Texas clinics, including that one that we visited a few months ago in McAllen in the Rio Grande Valley. 4 of her clinics were forced to close by that Texas law. Tonight's Supreme Court action may allow Amy Hagstrom Miller to reopen her facilities. Amy Hagstrom Miller, thanks very much for joining us tonight. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, absolutely. It's nice to talk with you, and something good happened.
Well, obviously this is good news for you, for people who support abortion rights in the state of Texas. First of all, did I summarize it accurately? I'm still sort of starting to absorb this ruling, and what's your reaction?
Well, my reaction is I'm very delighted. I can't believe that we've got both Kennedy and Roberts to rule in our favor. I think that's a huge precedent for us. It's delightful to be able to say yes to the women who have been calling us in the Rio Grande Valley instead of having to turn them away as we've had to do for the last 2 weeks. And so we are already calling, trying to set up a physician to come down and be able to serve women in that community as soon as we can. And we're also doing our best to keep our Fort Worth office open as well, and taking a look at reopening the Austin clinic as well.
So when you say that you've been turning women away, since the federal appeals court a couple of weeks ago issued that ruling that shut down so many clinics, including your own, including that clinic in McAllen, which is the only clinic serving that whole huge part of the state, did you have women still coming to the clinic, still trying to be there for their appointments, still trying to get abortions at your clinic, and you had to turn them away?
Absolutely, Rachel. Over the last 2 weeks, we had quite a few women. I mean, the day after the injunction got overturned, we had every single patient show up the next day anyway, mainly because it's not a community where we can call everybody by phone and reschedule an appointment. And so my staff found themselves there the whole day with those women, doing, ultrasounds and counseling and talking with them and doing our best to raise money for some of them who were able to travel north to get services. But there were quite a few women who just looked at us and said, I can't travel north, and I'm going to have to take matters into my own hands. And so those will be some of the first people we reach out to see if we can help them.
Amy Hegster-Miller, founder and CEO of Whole Women's Health, now facing a vastly different legal landscape than she was facing at close of business even today. Amy, thanks very much for being with us. Keep us posted on what happens next.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks.